Yesterday was a big day if you're a Sony fan because we finally have our first look at the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7, which is pretty cool. I just talked about this like a week ago because we know that the previous phones launched, the Xperia 1 Mark 6 launched in the middle of May officially. So I've been kind of keeping tabs on the dates and the timeline and all these things to see when it might come out. And it was kind of curious to me. We hadn't seen anything. So I'm like, okay, we got a kind of an unofficial leak from somebody saying it's happening. And then I kind of posited we should probably see something maybe in the next couple of weeks because the launch probably would be following up the normal timeline, May or June. So here we have a look at the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7. These are CAD renders. These are released by the guys at OnLeaks, which if you've watched my leak videos previously talking about other phones, these guys are pretty spot on with getting actual images and renders of what the phone should look like. So let's go ahead and take a glance. Now you can see that it looks very similar to the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. Now what we're expecting is another 6.5-inch screen, should still be the 19 by 5 by 9 aspect ratio. It looks like it might be just tiny bit wider instead of 6.5 millimeters, 6.8, if I'm saying that correctly. Anyway, so there might be a little bit or more depth. There might be a little bit extra room in there to accommodate some more battery, but one thing about the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6 was the battery was phenomenal. It lasted for days. It was one of those things where it was like this uncanny amount of battery life that came out of nowhere. So they did an amazing job with the battery. And of course, it should have our normal fan favorites that you can't get on other phones, like SD card expansion slot and a headphone jack. Also, it has a dedicated shutter button. And it looks like we're probably still going to get the same fingerprint scanner built into the power button, which I like that, but I would really like to see them follow that up with facial recognition to make everybody else happy. Now, among other wish list factors that people are concerned about, will it have 4K? That's something we can't determine from taking a look at these images. We can look at the size, we can look at the screen, we can look at the bezels, we can make preponderances about what we think the cameras might be, and there's a lot of speculation about the cameras. So we know that last year we still got the same Exmor sensor, which I think is really good. And one school of thought is that all three cameras could possibly have an Exmor sensor, which would be great because that would definitely take things up in the quality control department whenever it comes to taking photos with all three lenses. And of course, I would expect we'll still have like the telephoto macro and we'll have the continuous zoom and things like that. So the big questions for me, there are three big questions whenever it comes to the availability for the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7. Actually, kind of four. The first one, price. How much is it going to cost? Of course, that's going to be market dependent, whether it's released in Indonesia, it's released in Japan, it's released in Europe, wherever it happens to be. So price is going to be a big factor that we're going to have to look at. In addition to price, the other question is market availability. Will we get a US model? That's one of the biggest questions that a lot of people want to know, and certainly won't know that until they launch. Now, that was something that really was disappointing with the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. It was not available in the United States. Now, you could certainly buy one and use it, but it would really, I could kind of get it to work a little bit with 5G on like T-Mobile, but you had to go in and put some code in and mess with the settings for the antenna or the modem stuff inside of it. Like, it really wasn't something readily apparent. You couldn't just go into the settings and change it and make it work. It worked fine with 4G LTE and things like that, but because there was no US model, that did not have carrier certification, it did not have support, so you couldn't get official fully fledged 5G here in the US. That was disappointment. So will we get one in the US? I sincerely hope so, but here's the two-edged sword if we do get it in the US. So let's say it does come to the US, it's probably going to be really expensive. So it's one of those things where Sony just doesn't have much of a market share here. A lot of people really aren't very aware of their phones in the US unless you're a Sony enthusiast. If you're a Team Sony person like me, you probably don't even know about the Sony phones. A lot of people don't. So whenever they see that, it's not going to be as mass proliferated and they can't get those price per unit costs down. So that means if you want it and you want them to continue to be in our personal space to buy one, then we have to pay a premium because it costs more to make them per device. So that's one of the reasons they cost more. There just isn't as many being made, and it costs a lot of money to put them in different countries. So we'll see if that happens. Now, the other question, so we addressed the first two, availability, price. The big question that people really want to know about, is it going to have 4K screen? That I would like to know, and I don't think it will. One, it was kind of cost prohibitive with the technology, and they dumbed it down to 1080p, which I was upset about at first. whenever I saw it on paper and I heard about it, I'm like, man, this sucks. I don't want to lose my 4K screen, even though normally it was in Quad HD Plus. It would just turn up to 4K with supported content and watching video and things like that. So it wasn't always in 4K. It was in a 4K screen, but it wasn't always displaying in 4K. So let's just put a little pin in that one for a second. What I would expect is maybe we don't see another 4K screen. Maybe we see a 2K or 2.5K. We see a Quad HD Plus, which would be on par with the rest of the market. I felt like for the price, it was too big of a backstep to go from 4K to 1080p or native Quad HD Plus to 1080p. So I kind of expect that if they want to be taken more seriously and they want the fans to be happy, that they will return to that Quad HD Plus, at least for the visibility standard. And it sounds a lot better on paper when you're spending $1,400 on a phone if you're not getting a 1080p screen, right? Am I right? So that is one of the other glaring things that we need to worry about. So the big things I wanted to talk about, of course, were price, availability, and 4K. Now, the last thing I really kind of am concerned about, though, is long-term support. So we got a little bit of a bump, like an extra year of operating system updates, but it's still so far behind everyone else. Like the gold standards now, when you look at Android, you look at Google, you look at Samsung, we're talking about 7 years of support, 7 years of operating system updates, 7 years of security patches. I would be happy with if Sony would just go to 4 years of operating system updates and 5 years of security patches. It just doesn't look good on paper when you're getting 3 OS updates and you're paying like $1,400 for a phone. And I appreciate what Sony brings to the table. I appreciate their dedication, using their sensors, bringing some serious level hardware. They revamped the camera app. They gave us amazing battery. It's got a thin phone. They've got some really cool novel concepts they're doing, like the telephoto macro and things like that. Continuous zoom, that stuff. I really love that. That's fantastic. Dedicated shutter button, SD card. Like on paper, if this had a Samsung label on it instead of a Sony label, it would be the perfect phone. All the stuff everybody complains about whenever it comes to Samsung, whenever it comes to Google, like, oh, I'm not buying it. It doesn't have expandable storage. I'm not buying it. It doesn't have a headphone jack. I'm not buying it because all these things people get all up in their feelings about that have gone away years and years ago. Sony is still putting these in their phone, yet everybody craps all over the Sony phone, like, oh, well, yeah, it costs this much money. Well, yeah, I mean, it costs money for features, right? Especially at this point, it's kind of a niche phone. But it's weird because Sony is such a big company, we don't think of them as being a niche phone, but it really is a niche phone at this point because only really enthusiasts are buying it. And Sony really kind of does this stuff to continue their power projection in the smartphone, in the lens department, and showing and advancing some of their stuff. And I truly believe that we're working our way towards being a true DSLR camera in our pocket. I mean, there's just amazing things you've always been able to do with the Sony phones that you can't do with other ones. And if they can continue to dial that in, take this to the next level. And the other big question, how will they integrate AI? Now, we saw some of that, some like soft AI, computational photography integration into the camera app, especially in auto mode and things like that. It was very thoughtful, great work with the autofocus stuff. Sony is like next to none whenever it comes to autofocus stuff. Their autofocus is amazing. So they're doing some good things, but they're still relying very much on hardware. It's not like Google or Samsung, where they'll use a 2 or 3 year old lens and they just keep improving with computational photography. Sony goes in all in. They give us a great sensor, they give us a good camera, and then they give you the ability to go in and take the shots that you want. And now, kind of, I think, adopting a little bit of this, saying, okay, we need a better point and shoot. That's where that AI stuff comes in. And I really love the consolidation we got with the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6 when they moved to that kind of one camera option with the app instead of, oh, you need the Video Pro, you need the Cinema Pro, you need the, it was just so convoluted. And I think it was a big turnoff for a lot of people. So AI will be a question. Will they continue to ignore AI and just go like, look, we're just going to make a great smartphone and you can download Gemini if you want, right? So we'll see how that goes. But there's a lot of questions that are up in the air about this phone, right? It's something that people who love the phone are interested. We're waiting on it. And then people who are critical, of course, are not going to buy it anyway. Somebody just likes to sit around and complain. But it was refreshing to see that we got these renders. You can see what it looks like. And I'm excited. So that's pretty much all I got here for this video. I appreciate you watching. I'm sorry I've got this interesting kind of floral like headboard background going on. I'm traveling for work right now. I'm in San Diego. I will be back home tomorrow night. But yeah, a video or two, you're going to have to see the floral headboard background. I brought my stuff with me and I've got my lighting the best that I can, but it has this old, like Victorian, it's an old Victorian era resort. It's called like the Del Coronado. And it's actually like a historic, like it's listed as a historical place, right? It's been here forever and ever and ever. And it's really cool. So anyway, yeah, the lighting in here, not so good and conducive for videos, but doing my best here. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I'd love some feedback. Go to the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, of course, please hit the like and the subscribe button and the little notification bell if you want updates when new videos come out. But sound off. Sound off on the comment section if you're excited, if you want to know more, if you're looking forward to this phone, if you care about US availability, if you care about feature upgrades, all that stuff. Let's talk about it. And as always, thanks for being here. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys next time.